This is also the reason why we stopped dating men. Welcome back, goblins, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Liz, and I'm a person who is diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder. Today, I wanted to revisit something that we haven't thought about in years, which is one of our exes. No, this is not Acrylic. Acrylic is not divorcing us because of our alters. We're doing just fine, and we are approaching our 9-year anniversary in October. This is one of our past relationships that we'll be talking about today, and while our alters weren't the entire reason that we broke up, they were a very big part of why it happened. The relationship ended because of a lack of communication on both parts, his fragile ego, and our trauma disorder. Now, this fellow gained himself the nickname of the Chipotle Chode back from our college friends, and he hated that nickname. So, to avoid copyright from Chipotle and to protect his fragile ego, we will be hereby referring to him as Chippy. So, we had started dating Chippy shortly after graduating from high school. He was a breath of fresh air because we had just gotten out of a very abusive, toxic relationship, and the vast majority of us were head over heels for him. Especially Farkas. He took the breakup the hardest. At this point in time in our journey of self discovery, we had uncovered about 48 altars, which, in comparison to our current 300 known, is a very small number. So, Chippy had actually known about the DID before we even started dating, and he was receptive and seemingly accepting of it. However, he did start getting a little bit weird and slightly uncomfortable around some altars towards the end of the relationship. And at one point, he stated that he had been doing some research on the disorder, and he had found that the vast majority of cases have about 5 to 10 alters in the system. Obviously, that's not the case for everyone. Depending on the trauma that you've been through and your individual mind, you could have anywhere from 2 to hundreds of alters. There isn't a set number for the criteria of DID of how many alters you can and cannot have. And so he suggested that we start integrating alters. He meant fusing, but he said integrating, which was, of course, met with immediate pushback. And while we appreciate the concern and what he thought he was trying to do, he thought he was trying to help us heal, it did bring up a big point. One that we didn't really understand, but we knew that there was something there and that we couldn't fuse down to that number yet, if ever. He didn't like our resistance and got quite butthurt over it, which kind of drove a bit of a wedge between us. We felt as though he didn't respect us, or that he prioritized the host over everyone, which at that point was Diane. And she almost never fronts these days. I think he was well meaning, but undereducated. And he didn't know that we weren't at a point where we could do such a thing yet. So we did get a little bit mad over that. Some of us got more distant from him, understandably. And a few months later, he broke up with us the night before our first college final, which was biology. What a gentleman. The aftermath of that breakup was pretty harsh. Farkas definitely took out his emotions on the rest of the system and was quite harmful to the body, leaving us with bruises, burns, and I can't remember if there were cuts or not, but he was upset. He was very upset. If anything, that was closer to his boyfriend than Diane's, and he blamed the rest of the system for us getting broken up with, which doesn't really make sense in hindsight, but it does at the same time, you know? And so at that point, we literally swore off of men, said we would never date another man again, and we didn't, and we ended up marrying a woman. Absolute win. But circling back to him suggesting fusion, we were not at a point where we could have fused, even if we wanted to. The way that we work, we have to kind of know what happened to each alter in order for them to fuse, at least in some extent. We have to have at least a small memory or just a little bit of knowledge of what happened to them, what they formed from, why they are the way that they are, in order to make the fusion successful. We've had well over a dozen fusions at this point, because those alters are ready to fuse. We've been through a ton of trauma processing, whereas when we were 18, we hadn't. We hadn't gone through much therapy at all, and we hadn't figured out what our trauma was until Parsifal started digging in about 2017 and unearthed some of the worst memories we could have possibly imagined. And then we had to recover from that before we were able to start fusing. When we were 18 or so, we thought that we had become a system from isolation, growing up sheltered and growing up strict Christian. We thought that was the reason for our trauma. But that was not the case. Those memories didn't get unearthed until we were about 21 or 22. And along with those memories came hundreds of alters. At one point, our numbers reached 1,500, including fragments, but those all swiftly fused down after we had learned more about what they formed from and started to process that. To suggest that someone fuses right off the bat like that is a little bit foolish. Chippy definitely didn't know what he was talking about. I freaking love the nickname Chippy. Oh, it makes it so much better to talk about this guy. He was well-meaning, but underinformed, and we were not far enough along in our healing journey to start fusing on that level. I still don't know if we're going to reach numbers of 5 to 10, and if we never do, then that's how it is. Our spouse certainly doesn't mind. Even though it may be a bit hard to keep track at times, we work with it. We work together with understanding and empathy. And while some systems may be able to fuse down alters without uncovering their trauma memories, that would not have worked for us. The pieces wouldn't have fit together correctly, and we kind of would have been selecting like, you and you, just fuse, do it. And it would have ended up pretty badly. Kind of like asking a young child to put together a highly complex jigsaw puzzle. Honestly, we feel like with fusion, we are putting together a highly complex jigsaw puzzle. And it's taken a lot of time. Patience is definitely required for a process like that, and he was not the most patient of people. We've also seen this happen with many other people with DID. While we're scrolling on the internet, sometimes we'll see, oh, my partner is encouraging me to fuse alters, but I'm not ready, or that's not for me, or they're threatening to break up with me if I don't fuse. Which is really disheartening to see, and we highly relate to that, and we see your struggles with that. If your partner can't accept who you are because of your trauma disorder, then maybe you might need a new partner. It's okay if they're not a match for you. If they're trying to force you to do something that you're not comfortable with, then you don't need them in your lives. And especially if they're not highly educated in psychology. If they're just someone who's read a few articles online and said, oh, you need to fuse, that's what this article over here says, then that's not right. Dissociative identity disorder is highly individualized to each person's situation that they had to grow up in. To make a blanket statement about what treatment everyone with DID should go through is a bit unfitting. We've met many individuals who did not go through final fusion or fusion at all, and they're doing just fine. What he should have encouraged would be for us to go to therapy. That would have been fitting and helpful. We did start seeing a therapist probably about a week before he broke up with us. But good old Chippy was too impatient to wait and see what improvements therapy had to offer us. In the end, I'm glad he did break up with us when he did, even though it was quite hurtful, and a lot of our alters were extremely upset about that. That was no real loss for us, though. It was the start of us going on the path to find our wife. And Acrylic is the best person we've ever been in a relationship with. We don't regret swearing off of men in the slightest, and we don't regret holding off on fusing until recently. We had to uncover more of our trauma before we could fuse. Period. We couldn't just say, oh, our boyfriend wants to do this, so now I have to fuse my alters. That's not healthy. That would not have been a healthy choice. And if we had gone through with that, we would not be very well off today. I seriously hope Chippy did not end up in a relationship with someone else with DID, because he probably would have been on that shit again. Hopefully he found some nice, normal-ish girl, because he was probably the most normal person that we had dated at that point. He was a theater kid and a writer, and he was quite creative. He was cool. He played great piano. But he also had many, many, many flaws. Flaws that we couldn't see through our rose-colored glasses because we were just happy to be in a relationship where someone treated us right. But yeah, if you are a partner of someone with DID who is struggling with it and still uncovering their alters, hold off a bit on suggesting fusion until they've had more therapy and have been able to process their trauma a bit more. Support them through it. Don't just try to push the cure on them. Help them find what is the most fitting course of treatment and support them along it. Most people with DID need support rather than an answer pushed at them. They must discover things for themselves instead of someone telling them what healing for this disorder is. Because there are multiple paths of healing for dissociative identity disorder. You could fuse down to one alter. That's perfectly fine. You could fuse down to a small group of 5 to 10. And that's just fine. You could partially fuse down and integrate the rest of your system so that there's low amnesia barriers and many alters fused. Or you could go the functional multiplicity route and not fuse at all, and simply work on integrating your whole system, which would be lowering amnesia barriers and learning to work together. Chippy did not know any of that, nor would we have expected him to. Him telling us to fuse alters down kind of hit us like a ton of bricks at complete unawares, and we certainly did not appreciate that. So while he did hurt us quite a bit, he did give us something to think about. Our goal number is not 5 to 10. I'm not certain if that would be plausible in our case. Although we won't rule it out, it may happen someday. Maybe when we're like 70, but we won't rule it out completely. But we aren't expecting to get our numbers down that low. We went through extremely complex trauma that we did not unearth until we were in our 20s. And we certainly would have been too much for that boy if he stuck with us until that point. Oh my god, he would not have been able to handle that. You know who could? Our wife. We weren't even married when we started uncovering that horrible stuff, and they still chose to marry us. So we're in a great relationship now, but old Chippy was not the one. Not the one. Anyway, thank you for listening to our lore drop. We hadn't brought up a lot of our past relationships besides Stacy on this channel, but this one did bring up a point on what to not do if you have a partner with DID. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for tuning in. Please like and comment to support our channel. Hit that subscribe button if you want to become a goblin and join the Gob Squad. Take care of yourselves. And don't stay in relationships that are causing you damage. And we will see you all in the next video.